This episode of the Better To podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needom, author of the Better To Burnout series, which includes her latest releases of Fairy Tales and I Love You and Is Love Just Another High. Hi gang, Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better To podcast. Today's guest is Oliver Pigott. Oliver has a new song out called Eyes My Daddy Gave Me. Oliver has an interesting story because, well, he started his journey in Portugal, but lived in Canada and was a finalist on Canadian Idol. But that isn't the end of his journey because he got a deal with BMG and moved to LA and then London, and now he's in Nashville. And there's some stops in between. So we talk about all of those things, so stay tuned. Hi, Oliver. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm good. I know we had some issues on both sides with everything, and it's Monday, and that's okay because we're going to make this the best podcast we can.
All
So I want to dive right in. You were a Canadian Idol finalist, and I want to say this before we go right there. You have changed your image completely from what you presented then to who you are now. And, you know, being a child of the 70s, you have the vibe down now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice. It's my favorite kind of music.
I figured I was going to ask why you transitioned to there, but we can get there later. Let's go to the Canadian Idol thing. What made you get into that competition to start off with?
Well, at that point, I had been performing live for about 10 years. Started as a teen. Well, I started before I was a teenager when I grew up in Portugal. And so I've been doing it for many years. And I felt that'd be a nice leg up. And there have been a few people that had been on the show that had done well. And my brother agreed to do it with me. So that was another motivating factor. I think we were the first siblings in the franchise's history to be on the show. So we went on together. And I came back specifically from England to do Canadian Idol. I'd been touring and living out in London, England. And I just thought it was a great opportunity for exposure, and it was.
And a lot of people, I mean, I had talked to Ricky Duran, who did The Voice, and he was saying that you don't always want to win those competitions. You want the exposure, but you don't necessarily want to win those competitions.
Yeah, I think there's some validity to that statement. Absolutely. There have been some winners that have done well, but I think most people notice that the runners-up tend to do even better. So
Adam Lambert.
Great example. He was one of my favorite contestants on the entire show, because after having done it and having received that crash course in how to talk to the press and be on camera, I now know how difficult it is to be calm enough and composed enough to put on that kind of a show.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing I don't think most people realize is that it's not just, you have to keep part of you, but you also have to create a persona of what the public sees.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There was a person I was talking to not too long ago about a band, and she's like, well, the band would never lie to us. And I was just kind of like, okay, if you want to believe that.
Yeah.
But I mean, Hollywood has always been, smoke and mirrors. And that's going to be any kind of the entertainment industry, because that's what it is. You entertain us, but you have to keep part of yourself to who you are.
I learned a lot from my brother actually doing the show, because he was coming from an acting background. He's a fairly prolific actor. And he would meet with the crew and talk about what kind of lighting he wanted, and
Nice.
set it up like a stage show, which it really is. It's as much a visual medium as it is an audio medium, and I learned how to work with a camera largely from him. So that was something I hadn't anticipated going into the show. And
then you did do some acting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you've had a very interesting life, because I mean, you've talked about Portugal, you've talked about London, and you were on Canadian Idol, and now you're living in Nashville.
Yes.
So how do you handle culture shock?
That's a great question. I spent a lot of time in the US prior to moving here, and so I'm well used to interacting with Americans and American culture. And one thing I had really hit home for me after having moved here is how big time it really is, and it in contrast with the Canadian market. And people don't fool around here. You really got to hustle. And the fact that I'm surrounded by so many high-level musicians really makes me up my game, and it's a huge motivator for me.
Was that one of the reasons why you chose Nashville instead of Austin? Because Austin has a music scene as well, but it's not got the more well-known people, I think, where Nashville, you have a
Well,
lot.
interesting you asked that question because my wife's best friend lives in Austin. We had been in Austin prior to moving here and deciding to come here, and Nashville. We were kind of trying to decide between both of those markets, and something about Nashville really spoke to me. I like that it's a relatively small town, and it's got a certain charm that that really appealed to me and my wife, and so we just thought energetically we really vibed best with the Nashville scene.
And see, that's as long as you, when you move to a place, because that's one thing. I mean, I've moved a lot myself.
Yeah,
People don't realize that when you move, you're still taking you with you. So
yeah,
unless you are secure enough with yourself and you're happy with your surroundings,
yeah,
it's not a good move. You have to be true to yourself. So if you feel it
yeah.
energetically, that's where
Yes.
it's got to be.
Well, I'm very glad I was in Toronto for the amount of time I was. The license plate on the Ontario license plate says Ontario Place to Grow, which is a little bit of a cheesy thing, but it's true. It was a great place to grow. It's a small market in contrast with the rest of the world. So you can kind of make mistakes there and get away with it. And so I made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot about my craft. And if I had come to a place like Nashville before having all that under my belt, I don't think I would fare as well.
Well, and that's the thing. You had to, I think that people always look at success as, oh, it's overnight.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of mistakes, a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, is that moment that you got to walk into the Abbey Road studio and work there? How did that feel? I mean, that's like a mecca, a legendary place that had to have
Yeah.
some kind of vibe for you when you went in there.
It did. It did. I grew up, I mentioned spent much of my childhood in Portugal, and we had no television or any access to, modern culture. And I had a huge record collection I inherited from my dad, and there were a lot of Beatles records. So the Beatles were instrumental in my musical background, what formed me as a musician. So it really meant a lot to be able to go to Abbey Road and record in Studio 2, which is where the Beatles recorded, and see that everything was still as it was in the 60s, laid out, and obviously some new updates technologically, but it was basically the same room, and you could feel that energy. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
I mean, I can only imagine that you had to walk in there and just pause for a second, like, this is history, dude. This
Yeah,
is
I felt very grateful. Felt very, very grateful. Yeah.
so, as I said when we first started, I mean, looking at your older stuff, you had this more clean cut, I don't want to say modern, but a clean cut, normal
Yeah.
guy, everyday guy image. And
Yeah.
now I'm looking at you and looking at your pictures and stuff, and I'm thinking, I've stepped back into the 70s. You don't have a leisure suit, but and
No.
there's nothing wrong with that because I mean, fashion comes around and you have to, every great artist has something that, and I don't want to say gimmick because that's just a bad word, but they have an image that they create and that's how they present themselves. And that's usually how they're discovered. So you owning this is something that is different than most artists out there now. And it seems to be part of who you are truly.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I found my aesthetic, what works for me. I I've spent many years in various projects of different genres, and something my wife taught me, because she has an extensive history in theater, was how much a piece you might be wearing or some way you might cut your hair will influence your behavior. And so I find that really fascinating, where I can kind of change my look according to what the project might be,
Mm-hmm.
and embody it. And I find that fascinating. And I landed on the 70s because I feel like it's my spirit animal. 60s and 70s.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes people think I came out of a time machine, and I really am a time traveler. So I take that as a compliment.
As you should. And I mean, the one thing I was going to say, you don't see many men, well, back to Adam Lambert. Yes, he does it. But most male artists, they do not do the whole persona change. They pretty
Mm,
much, here I am, this is
yeah,
me. I mean, like Robert Palmer was always known for his suits. You would never see Robert Palmer really out of his suit, maybe occasionally a sweater, but it was
yeah,
always this more built manly look that I don't want to
yeah.
say manly. Manly is not the right word because, when you say manly, people are thinking ripped t-shirt and all that other stuff. But
Lumberjack or whatever.
yeah, but more of the business professional of the 80s or whatever. So
Yeah.
each most men don't get out of their comfort zone to reinvent who they are. So I give you kudos for reinventing your image.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So listening to your music, it definitely harkens back to the 70s. And I could hear it listening to it as if I were in the back of my dad's car. I mean, it's a good vibe and there is an audience for that. So what made you decide? I mean, I know you said it was your spirit animal, but what made you decide that, okay, I'm going to do the whole thing. I am going to repackage myself. I am going to be this person and bring this all out. And I understand you said your wife was a theater person,
Mhm.
but this called to your soul. And I understand you had that record collection. So besides the Beatles, were there some of your other influences in there?
Well, my dad, who passed away when I was 8, was a blues harmonica player, and he did have some Beatles and some Stones and the Woodstock album and that kind of thing. But most of his records were blues records. So the first thing that I did was I learned all the harmonica parts to an album called Fathers and Sons, which I now realize is very symbolic. I didn't think of it at the time, but it was a Muddy Waters record, and so I learned all the harmonica licks even before learning how to sing. And so the blues really was a single driving force initially for me musically, and so that underpins almost everything I do.
So how did you go from Argentina to London?
Portugal.
Yes, that's what I'm sorry. I don't why did I say Argentina? Portugal. Yes, sorry.
uh, well, I grew up in Portugal, and then I went back to where I was born, Toronto, with my family at about age 13, and then I was there up until I was about 20, and then moved to LA. I did a deal with BMG Publishing, and they sent me out to LA. So I was there for several years, and then had been curious about the British market. So I ended up moving to England, and that's when I recorded at Abbey Road. And then from there back to Canada, and now Nashville. So sort of been a bit of a world traveler.
Well, and when you think about the different that, and that's why I asked about culture shock, really, because when you look at the different, I mean, LA compared to, and granted, it's been years, but that you've been there, but LA compared to Nashville is two different beasts.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And LA to London is two different beasts.
It is. It is. It
So
is.
so finding your way through this and navigating who you want to be and finding your audience. And I mean, I understand that out in LA there's a pay to play thing going where if you're booking a venue to play, you're going to have to make sure that there's enough people here, otherwise you're not booking.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Nashville doesn't really do that,
Which
which
is
I'm grateful.
nice.
Yes, it is. It's very nice. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Nashville. You know, before I moved here, I of course thought of it as a country town, and now I know that it's much more than that. There's a giant Americana market, which appealed to me most. There's definitely an R&B market here, and I honed in on the Americana market, as I say, because it appealed to me most. And there were a lot of artists, like people like Jim Croce
Mhm.
or James Taylor. Jim Croce, especially, after having moved to Nashville and having that comment given to me a few times in terms of my vibe, my general vibe and sound. I decided to model what will be my next release off of Jim Croce. So that's the template, and now everything in the next year, I would say, will be modeled after that.
Well, and here's the thing, you brought, because yeah, when we think of Nashville, we think of country music. We
Mhm.
don't think of anything else. Maybe a little R&B, but we really think of country music.
Yes.
And no place is just that. I mean, I grew up in New Orleans and we have jazz, but we also have a different music scene there. We have blues, we have other music, we have folk music, but there's always these different pigeonholes that whatever it's known for, that's
Yeah.
what it's known for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, we had the Nashville TV show too.
Yeah. Yeah. That brought a lot of people to the city, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we talk about Eyes My Daddy Gave Me, this is your next release.
Mhm.
And you said Jim Croce. So, but what inspired the lyrics? I mean, you wrote this, so what inspired the song? I mean, I understand how you packaged it, but what
Yeah.
was really the calling to this? Because you lost your dad at such a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. He's definitely an influence lyrically on that song. Eyes My Daddy Gave Me was the first song I wrote after we decided to move to the US. We came during COVID,
Oh,
August 2020. So it was pretty intense. You could only fly at the time from Canada. So we flew over. Initially, we were based in Erie, Pennsylvania, because my in-laws are there, and my wife and I have twin boys. They're going to be 5 in January. So we needed
oh,
a little help while we were setting up. And I met a gentleman there who had a lot of money. He had about 4 acres in Erie overlooking Lake Erie, and a little cottage that he hadn't used in a decade.
nice.
He said, "Hey, why don't you stay here while you and your family are getting started?" Which was very kind. And he was a vintage car collector, so he had all these old 60s and 70s cars, which of course is my right up my
Yeah.
alley. And so I'd sit in that cottage and write, and I'd look out at the lake and the beautiful grounds. It was an old Christian. What was it? A Christian.
Compound.
It was a Bible camp, so there were all these
Okay.
little cottages there, very
Hmm.
peaceful. And so that was the backdrop against which I wrote "As My Daddy Gave Me." It initially was a bluesy song that wasn't quite working, and then Doc, my wife, said, "Hey, why don't you take that hook line and rework the song?" So I made it more folky, and I wrote it fairly quickly, which I find tends to be a good sign in the songwriting process when things come quickly. So
I think with creativity, that's the best way because then we're not overwriting, we're not over creating. It's there, it's pure, and
yeah. And one way I had decided to change my writing style in a major way was I dropped the idea for this new batch of songs I wrote in the US. I dropped the idea of writing a chorus as it's traditionally known nowadays, because I noticed with some of those old songs, the Beatles are a great example of this, early Beatles, rather than have your verse, maybe a pre-chorus and a chorus, you'd have an A section. Take 8 days a week, right? You've
mhm.
got the verse, and then you've got the hook line. It's not really a chorus to speak of. And then there's a B section, 8 days a week.
Yep.
And so I really like that 60s, 70s style of writing. So Eyes was very much modeled after that, where there's no particular chorus. There's a bit of a refrain, but you've got the hook line, then you've got your verses. And I'm really enjoying writing in that way.
Well, and here's the thing. I think now, especially with there's so many avenues to put your music out. If that's the way you want to write music,
Mhm.
then it's your thing, and there should not be these set rules that it better be this way.
Yeah.
Yes, because nowadays, everything anybody can create and be creative.
Mhm.
So if you have the talent and you can create a song that is pure for you to sing, because
Yeah.
ultimately you have to look at it this way. If your career blows up, are you willing to sing that song 20 years from now?
I know, I know. I think about the Stones having to sing Satisfaction, for the millionth time, and what that must
Yeah.
be like.
I can't get no status. Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah,
would just
which is
be,
ironic, given the lyrics.
yeah.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, it's like that, people, you can keep putting new music out and people will like some of the new music, but you're going to have the fans that are there for the nostalgia factor. And they're
Yeah.
not going to have a clue of what the new stuff is. And they want to hear
Yeah. They
Satisfaction.
won't be happy if you don't play it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
gets,
Yeah.
you have to be pure to yourself.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing when you put out a record. I mean, now that's the other question, I guess, for you is I know eventually this is going to turn into a record. And we don't listen to music conceptually anymore. A lot of artists want to create these conceptualized records like they used to, but that's not how the music business works anymore. We put
Like it's
our
single based more is what you're
right,
saying. Yeah.
right. We put it on shuffle and we don't get the whole message. And I talked to somebody about The Wall recently. You know, imagine taking The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall, and put that bad boy on shuffle. You're going to lose the whole context
Yeah.
of
Yeah. There's no arc. There's no arc.
no.
Yeah. You're
And I
right.
mean, even some of the Queen's music, you know, you had those big operatic songs, and then if you just put it on shuffle, it's not gonna
Out of
have those
context.
same. Yeah,
Same with an album like Abbey Road,
yeah,
where one song leads into another song. And
yeah.
no, it's a real shame.
It's a shame. It's a shame because you're losing something precious in the creative process.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it almost seems like now where in the past you'd have the arc of the album, you know, your ebbs and flows. Now you have to condense that all into one song and have that same maybe arc
Mm-hmm.
in 3.5 minutes that you otherwise would in half an hour or 40 minutes.
And the other thing about it too is you used to have those long-term fans. You could build that audience based on that record, and fans were patient if you
Mhm.
didn't put out another song for 3 years. It was
Yeah,
okay. And
yeah,
now it's like I want a new single every month.
yeah. I know. Yeah.
If you want to stay relevant, I want a new song every month. And I mean that gets to be old for the musicians. I mean it's tiring. Studio time is not cheap.
No, no. You know, there's workarounds now with the technology being what it is. There's a lot of stuff you can do from home, but you know, you want a great drum sound, you're going to have to get a great drum room, which costs.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people don't really look at the bigger picture. It's like, yes, we have all this technology and everything, but technology costs. And if you're not making the money because of streaming,
Yeah.
then you have to truly be a musician, writer, those things because you're
Mhm.
passionate about it.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to rain on anybody's parade. It's just one of those things where it's like, if you're not passionate about going into that business and you think I'm going to go be the next Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
you might
Well,
be.
people that get into it for fame tend to fall away fairly quickly just because of the grueling nature. I don't know, you know, how anybody who didn't have music as the central driving force can last, because without that, I mean, what's sustaining you? What's carrying you through all those difficult times, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you do it for fame, there's so many downsides to that because you're not being authentic with yourself. And are you really mentally prepared for dealing with everything that comes with it?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and why be famous? Being famous is scary. You know, there's a lot of crazy people out there, and so you got to deal with all that. So I don't
And
think people.
and you have to deal with people saying yes to you all the time, which might be nice, but then you have to deal with other factors, and not so much, I guess, now, but I'm sure that still exists where people that are supposed to be your handlers are providing you with substances or other things that are not good for you. So
Mhm.
to keep you going, to just
Yeah.
keep you going.
Well, it is arduous, especially if you're touring 200 dates a year or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So I don't want to take away from, let's get back to talking about you. So when do you plan on, I know the single comes out on October 20th. Are you releasing a record with this? Or are you just doing the single? I know
There
for
will
now
be.
it's a single.
I have a wonderful producer on board who produced Eyes My Daddy Gave Me, Clarence J. So I'm hoping to do many more songs with him in the future. I have a whole album's worth of material I'm sitting on. And I partnered up with a gentleman named Devin McPherson. He's the second guitar player. Like I say, we wanted to model it after Jim Croce, and one thing that I found challenging was playing all those intricate, because Jim Croce has a lot of intricate guitar parts, and so we wanted to kind of honor that by doing the same thing. So if you listen, you'll hear Eyes has that sort of intricate thing, and I found that challenging to be able to play those parts and sing at the same time, because I'm a serviceable guitar player, but in no way a virtuoso. I just sort of picked it up so that I could write music. So I had to step it up instrumentally, and so that was nice for me.
I get it. I had an ex-boyfriend we were in a band together, and the only music he listened to were the Beatles, Jim Croce, and Jim Reeves. That was it. That was
Oh
all he
wow.
listened. And this is 1980, and he's still just
Yeah.
listening to that. But
Oh
yeah, if it wasn't, we weren't going somewhere, he was playing his guitar, and that's fine. But he was playing that. And in fact, when
okay.
we were playing Beatles covers in the band, so yeah. So I
Yeah.
get it. I
Wow.
get it.
Not even any of those other singer-songwriters of the day? Like, did he like Don McLean or
No,
James Taylor? Or no.
no, no. He was a hardcore. He had every cover of every album of the Beatles, including the different covers
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the ones that weren't released in the US. And
yeah.
Jim Croce and Jim Reeves was it. And I'm just like,
Oh,
okay,
well, they're great artists at
they
least.
are, they
Yeah.
are. But it was just one of those
Uh,
things. We have much more music
yeah.
out there.
Yes.
But so
Yeah.
he prided it.
I was a little bit that way for a while, where I would sort of shy away from music I didn't necessarily understand immediately. And I now going back and listening to some of the artists I ignored over the decades, I can understand why they're brilliant with a more sophisticated outlook. So it's interesting to look back and go, wow, I really was sort of willfully ignorant about certain
Mm-hmm.
artists.
Because there's certain things you just don't want to when you're listening, especially when songs will use the radio. When a song is constantly played on the radio over and over and over again, like there's songs from the 80s that I was just like, oh, I can't stand this. I never
Yes.
gave this song any credit. But if I hear it
Yeah.
now, I have a different respect for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Another interesting thing for me with that is after having spent so long in studios and being party to the behind the scenes and how songs are made, I can hone in on certain instruments in a song, even if it's a song I've heard a million times. I want to listen to the drum. I'm going to listen to this song now just for the drums and just hear what the drums are doing. And then you just pick out an instrument, and now you're hearing the song in a whole new way.
Yeah. I mean, because I did play bass for a bit, I tend to, when I listen to a song, the first time I'm not so hardcore about listening, but as I listen, the bass is always going to stand out. And if it
Yeah,
doesn't have that, then I
yeah.
usually find myself going, it's okay. But
Do you try and surmise what amps they're using and so on?
I'm not that hardcore. I
Yeah,
mean, I dabbled in playing bass. I did it for a few years, and then I honestly, my late husband, he joked with me during COVID. He's like, "You've owned a bass the whole time I've known you. I don't think you can play it." And so the amusing thing was, John Taylor was doing these bass tutorials, and I knew how to play John Taylor from Duran Duran. I knew how to play Rio. I just hadn't played it in years. So pulled out the bass. My husband was away. I pull out the bass, and John's talking about how everybody wants him to play something.
yeah.
So he whips out Rio on the bass, and of course nobody recognizes, nobody understands. This is what he says in the tutorial. So I watched the tutorial, and I'm back in sure I know what I'm doing. I'm playing again, and my husband comes home like, "Honey, I'm going to play for you." He's like, "Okay." So I play it for him. He looks at me, and goes, "What the hell is that?"
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm just like, "Well, it's funny you say that because he said the same thing." He's like, I said, "But I can play, see?"
That's great.
It was funny because yeah, the other one,
Do you still play regularly?
me, I haven't touched the bass. I own my bass and I would love to play, but I
Yeah.
stick more to my writing now than actually playing.
Are you do you write music mainly or?
No, I write books. I write books about the music industry set in the 80s. So
Okay.
I kind of live my glory fantasies of what I could be doing. Uh, even though they're not really glory fantasies, but yeah, I kind of tend to go that route with that. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with you must be familiar with Hitman, the book Hitman.
No, actually, I'm not.
It was about the payola
Okay.
phenomenon of the 70s and 80s,
Okay.
and centers around CBS Records, and very, very interesting. You know, the corruption, which I'm sure carries over to this day in different forms. But
When I worked in radio, because I worked in broadcasting back in 1993, I lucked into getting a job at radio. And the first station I worked at was the sister station of WKRP. And no, it's not in Cincinnati, it's in Indiana. But
okay.
I worked at WINN, and all I need to do was get promised that I wasn't going to say do certain things on the radio. Three questions. Pay $25. I'm a licensed jock.
Hmm.
Okay. So there I got to pick everything I played. During certain weekends, we would have where we would have to mark everything down, turn it into the station so the artist could get paid.
Hmm.
When I went to a station a year later, a clear channel station, I believe it was, everything was pre programmed. It was all computerized. I
Hmm.
did not get to pick anything. And
Yeah.
so, in a way, I think we've changed that around because to
Hmm.
me, if it's already pre-programmed, that how is that not payola as well? Because
Yeah.
it's not the person calling in saying, "Hey, can you play this?"
Yeah. 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 Like, how did it get on that pre-programmed playlist?
Right. I mean, and the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, there were times when after I would leave my shift on Sunday evenings, Dr. Demento would start, and there would be that played, and then there would be
Yeah.
nothing else played. They would have just go onto computer for the rest of the evening. So, who was running the station really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nowadays, is it really only the college radio DJs that pick songs?
I believe so. I mean, I haven't been
Yeah.
in radio since 95, but I'm pretty sure that everything now is computerized because it's much easier to just to have there's jocks there. But
Mhm.
and I mean, I will say this. There was one time I was really awful as a disc jockey because Whitney Houston's Run to You was out.
All right.
And the same girl kept calling over and over and over again. And it had already played. So she kept calling over and over again, and you're telling her, yeah, it'll be on, it'll be on.
Yeah, yeah.
Me being the wise ass that I was, whipped out Brian Adams' Run to You.
Oh
Put that on, and she calls back, that's not the Run to You I was talking about. I'm like, I'm sorry. But I mean, and
no.
that's the thing. You had limits on, I can't play this song. We just played it an hour
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. But did you have screeners and stuff that would had those people off?
No, no,
No.
I worked small radio. I worked in a big market, which was New Orleans. That was my second station. But to be honest, as glamorous as that sounds, the radio station was about an hour and a half away from New Orleans in a bayou.
Oh wow.
And my first station, I was in the middle of a cornfield.
Cool.
So there was nobody to screen those things. I've
Yeah.
been at stations in Chicago as far as a guest, seeing how they have screeners and everything. But no, at the time, it was straight up, you dealt with everything. I got to pick everything. And the whole reason I got to be a disc jockey was because I won a pizza off the radio.
Oh, nice. Wow, what a great story.
So yeah, I mean, those are the things though, because when you're talking about radio play, so now it's like you guys though have more control
Hmm.
because this is where this devil's advocate thing is. Because I know you don't get much for streaming, but but you get to hype your stuff more, you get more ears to it. If it gets into
Yeah.
somebody's shuffle after they're just listening to random stuff,
Hmm.
you can be
Yeah.
discovered.
It's a mixed bag, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because just like, I mean, I've talked to somebody about this the other day. It's like, because just like Spotify, Kindle Unlimited, they pay like, I think, 0.003 per page
Yeah.
read.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
I don't know.
I might as well sell my book for 99 cents and get 59 cents and
Yeah.
call it a day. But I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's the hard thing being a musician is how do you pay for your studio time when, you have to be invested with your creativity and your heart to do it.
Hmm. Hmm. I had one of the reasons I got my papers here, other than Idol, was a song that I wrote with my brother because my brother's in the acting world, and he at the time, this was right after Idol, he was getting some more acting roles as a result. We wrote a song called "Alien Like You" for a show called Being Erica that he was starring in, and lots of revenue, lots of instant recognition. And it just seems like placement, film and TV placement is a great area for artists to focus on these days, especially.
And didn't you win a BAFTA? Or
Uh,
were you nominated for a BAFTA?
for that show,
I don't know if it was for that show,
I
but
know it was a Gemini, at least Gemini nominated. The
yeah,
Gemini's in Canada. I don't know about BAFTA.
I thought you were not.
Uh,
I could have
Oh, was
misread.
that for that? Oh, that was for a different. So that was for a song called Elevator that
That's
I
it. Yes.
yes, I sang on that. Yeah.
See, I knew, I just, and I have my notes and I'm trying not to dig on my notes. I'm just sitting, it's
That's
right
okay.
here, elevator, but yeah. So I knew, I mean, still, that's a big deal that puts your name in. I mean, look at Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman was the lead singer of Oingo Boingo, and then him and
Mhm.
Tim Burton collaborated. And then, yeah, now what does he do besides dealing with Oingo a little bit? He now
Mhm.
creates great soundtracks. I mean, there's a,
Yeah, yeah, he got well into the scoring world. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, you are not opposed to getting that product placement.
No, no, of course not.
And quite honestly, there was a song that was I was watching Hulu and they kept replaying this one song and it was annoying, but then it was like I really kind of like this. So it
Yeah,
worked. The
yeah,
other
yeah.
song they kept playing, I was just kind of like, no.
I
But
got some great film guys on Eyes My Daddy Gave Me, actually, now that you mention it. Brian Allen and Chris Powell, bassist and drummer who played in the Elvis movie.
oh,
They're all over
nice.
that movie. So that was a nice coup for me. So you'll hear that on the track.
So will there be a video for this?
Yes, there's probably going to be two separate ones. There's one we're going to probably put out in Canada, working with a close friend out there. And then the American release of a music video would be to be determined, but there's definitely going to be some
So
form of an American version. Yeah.
why two separate ones?
That's a great question. I think the cultures are a little bit different, and it's a
No.
great. There's some key differences, I'd say, in the two markets, and it's a great opportunity to do two versions. Maybe extend the promotion a little bit more as a result.
Makes
And
sense.
we just like being creative with people that we like. And I like working with people who are experts in their particular field, whether it's mastering or mixing or producing or being a videographer. I don't do those things well. So I like to focus on what I do and then collaborate with as many cool, creative people as I can.
I get it. And it makes sense to do that.
Yeah.
So are you excited?
Very excited. I'm my opinion of this song of Eyes My Daddy Gave Me, it's the best sounding song I've ever put out. I think it's one of my best in terms of the writing. And it's obviously very meaningful for me, both because I'm now a dad myself. I also have a strong spiritual life, and because my dad died. So those three things all tie in to make it a song of great import for me. So I hope that reads for everybody else, and they get as much out of it.
So if you had a venue in Nashville, where would your dream venue be?
Well, the Opry, everybody says, says the
Not the
Opry.
not the Bluebird?
No,
Really?
not
Okay.
particularly. I do like it. I do like it. I like the soft cedar vibe, and the sound at the Opry is wonderful. And I think that's just kind of my speed, that type of a venue.
Well, the
A coffee
Opry,
shop. The Bluebird's very much a coffee shop type of event, and I've played so many of those.
and
Um,
you've been there, done that.
yeah, I would never turn down a gig at the Bluebird though if they want to have
I
me.
know, I know. I'm just saying, I get it. It's like, oh, I've been there, done that, but it's like, oh, but wait, if you want me there,
Yeah, where I am playing that is going to be awesome is Dark Horse Studios in Franklin, Tennessee.
I saw that and I was going to mention that, but it's a
So I
private,
can
it's a private showing.
yes, yeah. And it's going to be basically a retrospective of stuff I've done since moving here, songs I've written since moving here. And
You're
so I can cross that off the bucket list because that's probably one of my favorite. It's right up there with Abbey Road in terms of recording studios.
and you're recording there.
Yeah, it'll be a live recording. We're going to film it.
So are you going to release a live record then and a live compilation?
I think, yeah, we're gonna definitely put out the videos as the songs come out, I think. So kind of a trickle down thing.
So then is this going to be part of that whole big new record coming out, or is this going to be a separate project?
No, it's all part of the
Okay.
what will be the record. Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna have a studio audience there, and it's gonna be a great vibe.
When do you hope to have the record out by?
Well, I'm just focusing, as you mentioned, singles are really what people like nowadays. So I'm gonna focus on putting out one song at a time. And I think I have about 10 keepers. I threw out, I've written about 30 since moving here, and I've thrown out most of them. I'm very ruthless with my own material, but I'd say I have about 10 that I consider keepers. And so ultimately, they're all the songs that I put out individually are going to be part of a record.
We're always our own worst critic. So
Yeah.
you should let other people check your work out before you pitch
Well,
it. But that's
I use my wife Donka as a testing ground a lot, and I'll play her the songs as I write them. And if she goes, yeah, that's good, I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna throw that one out. He has to flip out. I have to get, there's a few other people I'll send them to as well for a reaction. But if it's not effusive and they're not loving it, then I'll just go back to the drawing board.
I'm going to ask a really ridiculous question, but we're coming up on that season. So would you ever consider writing a Christmas song or covering a Christmas song?
Absolutely. I've started that process a few times. And I haven't quite landed on anything I consider good enough to put out, but I want to do that. I very much want to put out a Christmas song. Yeah. It's my favorite time of year, actually.
Well, then it's a natural. And I mean,
Yeah.
you should do it because, yes, during that time, I had a guest on a couple of years ago who wrote a Christmas song and it did really, really well. And it's become kind of a classic Christmas
Ooh,
song.
what's it called?
Now I knew you were going to do that. It's been 2 years, so I don't remember, but
Okay.
he,
Nice.
it was basically, he wrote this Christmas song and he said that he had gotten, I think it was like close to 3 million streams right
Wow.
after he released it. So I,
Wow.
I will get the name of it and I will send it to
Yeah.
Anna so you can get
Well,
that.
I promise to do that. I will be doing a Christmas song.
You
Maybe I'll,
should.
I'll shoot for next Christmas.
You should. I will say this, when I was a disc jockey, I worked Christmas Day for 4 hours.
Okay.
All I can say is being in a little booth, listening to the
Yeah.
same Christmas songs over and over again, many
Oh
different
yeah.
versions.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it gets so Christmas songs, there needs to be many different and
Yeah.
diverse for the
It almost needs to be a padded room, I would imagine at a
yes.
certain point. Yeah.
Yes. At a certain point, it was just okay. And then to go home
Yeah.
and celebrate Christmas is like, yay. So yeah. Christmas though, I think a Christmas song would be awesome for you. I think it would, especially
Well,
if you give it a
thanks for the reminder. I will do that.
for a 70s Christmas vibe, it would definitely add to it too.
70s Christmas vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the Kinks have one of my favorite Christmas songs. I think it came out in the 70s.
Well, maybe
Father
look,
Christmas, Give Me Some Money. You know that one?
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe look at something like that and maybe cover it if necessary.
Well, yeah, I could do a cover. I'd like to do an original. I'd like to write an original Christmas song.
Who said you can't do both?
Good point. I could put out a whole record.
It could be an homage.
Yes.
An homage.
Yeah.
So, what do you hope after this record comes out, which we're going to say most likely will be sometime next year? What is going to be your next project to do? Are you planning on going on tour? Because I mean, I know you have twins, and touring with twins does not seem like a lot of fun.
Touring, it wouldn't be my preferred way to go about it. We'll see. We'll see how everything unfolds. I'm not opposed to it, but as you mentioned, there's certain logistical issues with that.
Mm-hmm.
But after these 10 songs come out, I imagine I'll be dipping my toes in a few different other genres because I tend to get a little bit squirrely sticking with the same genre for any extended period of time. So there's a lot of things that I'm sitting on that are different in nature, different genres, different sounds that I'm just unsure as to how to put out yet, and maybe that's okay. Maybe they just take time to unfold.
So maybe next time we talk, you'll be like 90s grunge man or something.
Maybe. I've got an EDM project that I worked on many years ago with a good friend of mine. We were both going through a breakup at the time, so they're kind of songs that are, based on that premise.
And
Um,
that's not a timely thing at any time.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody's got to break up sometime.
yeah. So I think they're great things. We just never figured out a way to put them out. So maybe at some point those will come out. Those are, as I say, stylistically drastically different. So we'll see. We'll see.
Some of the greatest bands, and this goes back to the longevity of it. Yes, the Stones sound like the Stones, but they also had different projects and different takes on songs that changed their sound up. And
Hmm.
so part of the I think the reason bands last is because they change stuff up.
Yeah, yeah. Strategically, yeah.
There,
David Bowie is another great example,
yeah,
really.
yeah.
Yeah.
There was a group called the Outfield, and the first three songs they released all sounded alike. I had a friend who loved the Outfield, and I was just kind of like, they
What was one of their big hits?
Josie's on a vacation far away.
Hmm. I don't know if I'm familiar.
It's from the 80s. I don't want to lose your love
Oh yeah,
tonight.
yeah. I
Yeah.
don't want to lose
Yep.
you. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but their songs sounded a lot alike. And so some fans will like that, but then for longevity, you got to change things up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't last if you don't.
No. And
Unless
while
you're AC/DC.
this is true.
Yeah.
This is true. But I mean, like you said, Bowie, I mean, look at his career and look how much he diversified.
Oh yeah, actually, Clarence J, the producer on Eyes My Daddy Gave Me, he bought the board that was used in the Ziggy Stardust sessions.
Really?
He runs everything through that board. It gives him a certain sound, a unique sound.
Wow. And you're not going to find that sound today.
No.
I mean, that's the one thing people sometimes, I love tech. I do because tech is allowing us to do this.
Hmm.
But when you lose certain things, such as a soundboard, or
Yeah.
yeah, and I know they're back now, but a few years ago, about 10 years ago, LPs were a dirty word. I have my
Yeah.
record collection. I've had my record collection since I was in high school, but
Yeah.
for a long time, oh, that's nasty. I need a CD where it's all pure. Mm.
Yeah. We had a friend who's a few years younger than us in Toronto, and we had a turntable at our house. And I remember she was over one day and she wanted to put on a record, and we watched her try and figure out how to put the needle down, and she just at one point just dropped it and backed away. Like,
Oh
that's not
my
how you
gosh.
do it. It's so funny.
Wow. Well, I mean, there's so many, my I grew up in the 70s, like I said, so I know what it's like to dial a phone, a rotary dial phone, trying to win a contest.
Yeah, yeah,
And that was just if
yeah.
you screwed up one number,
Start again.
yeah. And I mean, it was like you had to wait for it to go all the
Yeah,
way back.
yeah. You'd be really mad if it had a number with a lot of zeros in it.
Yes, yes. So I
Yeah.
mean, I appreciate technology, but as you know, as we're talking about, it changes things because your sound is going to sound different.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a new bass that came out that they basically use the same pickups that the Beatles use. They use the Vox pickups. So it was like they're trying to recreate some of those sounds for some people when they make a custom guitar. So I think it's important that we don't just rely so wholeheartedly on tech.
Yeah, yeah. It's just so easy, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as a writer, I don't write longhanded. I used to write longhand. I used to use a typewriter, but no,
Yeah.
give me a computer any day of the week. So, so are you having a release party on the 20th for your?
The song comes out the 20th,
Mhm. And I know
and
you're
then
doing.
the show at Dark Horse is going to be the following day on the
Okay.
21st.
So that's kind of the release party
Yeah,
slash.
kind of. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Cool.
So I'm very excited.
So is there anything that we did not discuss? Because I know we kind of went all over the place that you would like to add?
Well, I appreciate you having me today. It's been really nice, and I think we covered everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
I hope you guys enjoyed our interview. Oliver, I wish him the great success. Some of those things we talked about, like him being in Abbey Road, I can only imagine what it was like to step foot in there. And I would take it to feel the same as if you did step foot on stage in the Grand Ole Opry. There's certain things as a musician that, even as just a music lover, that these places are hollow. These places are rare ground to be on. And to see that he has transformed himself. If you look at other pictures of him from his younger days, he has transformed and embodied the persona of what his music is and who he is at this point in his career. And I think it's great. I think, we were talking about Bowie, and Bowie was one of those people that did that, but most people don't. Most gentlemen in the music business, they stick with their image and that's who they are. So to be able to evolve and to change and to own themselves and create the music that speaks to you and kind of as a homage to his father, I think that's a wonderful thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. I hope you guys support his music. As always, the sound and production is done by Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio. And if you want to be a guest on the podcast, please reach out to Donna at dmneedom.com or Donna at better2podcast.com. Either way, you can drop me a line and I'll be certain to answer. I hope you guys, whenever you're listening to this, have a fabulous day, evening, whenever, a weekend even. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye. The Better 2 podcast is mixed, edited, and produced by Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio Productions.